a bunch of people are building like personal assistant,
Oh yeah.
the AI personal assistants using Composio. That's where kind of tools like Gmail, Calendar, Notion, Slack.
Is it like indie hackers building it for their own good, or is it product companies building it as a service, or what?
It's a mix. We have a bunch of startups. Like we have now 300 plus companies.
Welcome to One Shot. This is our global stage for AI tinkerers, where we take some of the people who are really on the cutting edge and doing some of the most interesting work that's relevant and exciting and new and on the frontier, I think, of what things we're all building. So they can come and let us look under the hood and hopefully inspire us and enable us in our own projects. And today I'm very excited to welcome you, Karan, from Composio, which is one of the most exciting frameworks, which we're going to get into, but welcome.
Thanks a lot for having me.
It's awesome. Agents is on everybody's mind, and there's new frameworks dropping every day, and 3 open source projects and 2 other things. And there's the browser control, computer control, and everything else. It's hard to make sense of it all. Can you make sense of it for us?
Right now, it's all DeepSeek, right? That's what I see it on Twitter.
DeepSeek is definitely taken over. Well, it's interesting. Is one of the challenges with agents that they're wrong? If the more autonomous they are, the more wrong they are. Does reasoning help there?
Yeah, I think kind of reasoning, essentially better reasoning means better, more complex things can be accomplished by agents, right? So yeah, always great.
I mean, DeepSeek's been out the R1 for like a week and a half, maybe. Have you seen your customers using it and sharing any improvements or results?
Not exactly kind of like on the customer front, but I tried a few examples and like specifically a bunch of more complex ones became like much better with R1.
In what way?
I think tool orchestration was much better, kind of like which tools to choose amongst them.
Choosing the right tools for the right job.
Yeah, and kind of like the complex tools, choosing the right parameters became much better.
Well, I'm really excited to like dive in today, but why don't we start with like what is Composio and showing us the code of like the most basic use of it so people can get just an idea of what it is. Yeah.
So essentially, if you think about it, agents are kind of LLMs plus tools, right? Like kind of these LLMs are getting more and more powerful. You see these models kind of DeepSeek coming up and probably solve some of these lead code problems faster than a bunch of engineers combined, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you try to connect these LLMs with real world tools, that's where things start to create problem. Firstly, you have to kind of dive into the authentication world, where how do you give the LLMs access to the right set of tools with the right set of permission. Once you do that, you have to design your schema in a way, like we all use function calling or some or the other form of these agents calling these tools. So designing the schema such that the accuracy of LLMs calling these tools is high. You have to kind of create a bunch of evals around it, etc.
Sure.
And that's where Composio comes in. We solve for end-to-end authentication, authorization. You can provide the right scope to the agents to get control of your Gmail, calendar, whatever kind of like tools you're using. We have 200 plus tools right now. And I think very fine-tuned.
So essentially you're using the world is LLMs become useful when they can get work done.
Yeah.
And the way software can get work done is through APIs. Tool calling is your means, but it's not going to get the job done without some middleware layer. That's Composio to make that accessible and easy for a programmer. That's where you fall. So the world is like, there are work creators and work doers. I always say, like, if you're an early stage startup, eventually, you're like, I need to hire a PM, and they create a bunch of work. Now you need more engineers.
Yeah.
LLMs are sort of like that. Without tool calling and getting work done, they just tell you more things you could do.
Yes, exactly.
And the promise of agents is to be able to get work done. And then your route is like, let's go through APIs and make that. And we're going to get into that. Humans get work done with just the browser. So if you can look at visually a screen and just know where things are and know where to click. And obviously we've seen some really exciting developments there, both in open source and from the big companies. Would you consider those are kind of the 2 alternative approaches?
Yeah, obviously alternative, but I would say it's kind of like you don't want everything to be controlled by a browser, right? Like these LLMs are stochastic models. They can go wrong. What if instead of creating a lead, they delete a lead? And I think there's a lot that can go wrong there.
Yeah.
And the other problem that comes in is essentially like latency, for example, like in kind of getting some of even simpler tasks done in kind of complex tools like Salesforce.
Yeah.
It's going to take like a long time, like minutes to kind of get, like, let's say adding a data set to a kind of customer. And if you're on a call, if like an agent is on a call, you can't let your customer wait for that long, right?
Yeah. It's
That's
slow.
where APIs are a right set of things where kind of you already have the authentication and authorization standard. So you know you can give like very granular access to your agent so things don't mess up.
I have access to everything. There's no off. It's like, it's me. But when I give it over to an AI that could delete or disconnect or change my password or whatever, like it's a danger. And then you don't have the logging, the auditability, the fine-grained security, the or speed. And speed is important, and cost, right?
By the way, we are integrated to Anthropic computer use. We'll probably integrate with Operator. So
if you can model a tool and call it, then you could call a browser tool.
Exactly. So it's like essentially a mix in the like coming world. It's not going to be like one thing.
Okay, cool. And then you submit to like 200 or 250 integrations that you've built. What does that mean? You've handled all the base case to do off and tool calling in a way that, it's going to work and not, that's going to work from the get-go, the high quality. And then it's integrated into your tools. You get some visibility. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
What are some of those, like, what are the most popular ones in there that are most useful?
I think I'll just kind of showcase you some of the tools that are present in Composio. So like GitHub, Jira, SendGrid, Postdoc, these are some of the ones that are like developer related. Then obviously you have the popular Google ones like Gmail, Google Calendar, Google Photos.
So, there's coding work getting done as building code and doing coding tasks, and there's coding tools and IDEs and software agent startups. Are people like that using Composio under the hood to build coding things?
Yes. So kind of like we obviously have these kind of GitHub type of tools, which people use to, for example, create a PR.
Sure.
Like add a comment to a PR, etc. And then we have like some of like which we call local tools, where kind of you can give agent access to your local machine or a Docker instance, etc. And like the agent can clone a repo, start working on it, execute code, etc.
So if you're building coding tools, you have both sides of that, so that you can get the data where it needs to be to build and run and deploy systems that are agentically built. And then on the knowledge worker side, you mentioned tools like Jira and Google Docs, Gmail. I used Gmail with Composio last night. It worked great, so that you can get all the access to that stuff. Okay. Why don't we show people actually like some code, like show me getting into one of these tools and doing something.
Yeah. Let's start with a kind of small example where let's say you want to give your agent access to Google Calendar and let it create kind of events. So let's say you have prepared a set of to-do lists, like 1 to 3 p.m. you want to do something. So essentially you can see this is a kind of simplish agent using Crew AI. This you can use, by the way, Composio with any of these frameworks, be it Crew AI, LangChain, Llama Index, Leta. Yeah, all of them. Like we have native integrations with all of them. So in this example, I'm using Crew AI, and probably another example, I'm using Llama Index to give a breadth of the agentic frameworks. And you initialize with Composio toolset. You give the tool that you want your agent to have access to, in this case, Google Calendar.
Cool.
And you can give like full Google Calendar. You can also give particular action. So let's say I want to just give action of like Google Calendar create event. Then what I'll need to do is just essentially add action here.
Oh, interesting. So you're wrapping their API basically in that way. That's just a straight API wrapper, essentially.
In some cases, it's a straight API wrapper. In some cases, under the hood, we might be calling multiple APIs. In some cases, it's probably like where we feel like the APIs are very complicated for the agents. We do agentic. It's an agent under the hood inside a tool as well.
So you try to make them easier to use as you go, or more accessible when that as an agent is going to use it in a certain way.
Yeah.
In a tool call instance. I noticed one thing here. I used your Gmail fetch emails tool and I was passing it English. I was saying, get me 5 recent emails to this address.
Yes.
And it was then using the LLM to generate and run the function call to Gmail's API, which I thought was an interesting approach. Is it always that? But it's not always that way where it's abstracted with a tool, an actual call to Gmail.
So essentially, we support kind of multiple ways to use tools. I'll
Okay.
just quickly go into kind
Okay.
of one of them. So let's go with Gmail, for example. So I have my Gmail connected. I have multiple of these actions. So we have a natural language way to run it. So send email to, this is my personal email, stating that I'm busy with Joey recording this podcast. Today, I think I'll just 29th January, press generate. It will generate all the required things. So I'm busy with Joey. This is a recipient email, user ID me. And when I'll run it, it has run. I received this.
No, such fun. That's great.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm busy. Yeah, that's cool. Right on. Cool. Yeah. And I was able to use it just to end to end. I was using Ruby. So I had most of the time was honestly spent like deciding how I should bridge over to Python. But I wrote a Python script using Composio. I didn't use any agent frameworks. I just went straight calls. And I just created a function that was like, given an email address and some English, pull those emails that match that English. And then I pull everything, like tons of data. And then I gave that to Gemini thinking, the reasoning engine.
Right.
Tons and tons of data with a prompt that was like, hey, is there anything in my inbox right now that it deserves interrupting me? You know, like that I should break my workflow, deal with this if it's important enough. And I gave some criteria.
Right.
And in like 5 or 10 minutes, I had that working.
Makes
That was pretty cool. And then the setup was, I guess for people who because you didn't show the setup, sign up to Composio, decide that I want Gmail is what I want to muck with. You go through the regular Gmail auth flow on your website, which was really super quick. I will land it on a page where I get like my Composio key to copy to put in my end. Like I'd never had to search for anything. It was all right when I needed it. And so that was really, really well done. So by the time I ran the test code I wrote the first time, it actually worked. And I assumed it would break and it worked. And I looked at the result. I was like, oh my God, it actually worked. It was a good, delightful first time experience.
I think we try to kind of hone down the DX. Like we try to keep the aha moment, like time to value for our users, like really minimal. I think that's the idea.
Okay. So we've seen like what Composio is. We've seen some code to use it. And I explained how I used it. And what about the architecture? Like when I'm now running a Composio, one of these tools to do whatever, or 3 of these tools to build an agentic workflow, let's say, or an autonomous thing if I'm more ambitious. Now I want to deploy that and use it. What do I see? First of all, what is your architecture? What happens each time I run it? Where's data going? You know, Google already has my inbox. Gemini thinking is what I used to analyze it. That was on my code.
Right.
But when I pulled it through, did you see all my email somewhere in your server? Like, show me the architecture. Where's data flowing? How does that all work? And then are there tools that you provide to give me visibility into like runtime? And then eventually, how are you going to charge? Yeah. Like, show me the bigger picture, I guess.
So yeah, I think, by the way, kind of the data does flow through us, but we are SOC 2 compliant, you can see it. And we also support self-hosting for larger customers. So if some of them don't want us to kind of hold the data, that's also possible.
Whatever your engine is, you have a way to deploy it somehow to an enterprise customer. If you have
yes. It's a proper Kubernetes EKS setup. So kind of, Helm charts, anybody can kind of deploy it in whichever VPC they want.
Okay, cool.
And yeah, I mean, the best part is you can kind of like all the logs are visible here. So you can see this was the action that was run for. So like Composio is kind of multi-entity. Composio has multi-entity support. What I mean by that, you can have your account logged in. You can have your user's account logged in, and they can be kind of like, there's a concept called entity ID.
Oh, cool.
So let's say like I'm building an application. I want multiple of my users. One of them is Joey. One of them is Karan.
Great.
So kind of I can have like different entity IDs.
Oh, that's killer. You know what I want to do with AI tinkers? I have the city managers around the world. I'd much rather build the tool to list them off their LinkedIn or whatever it is. I can help them post content from their events, but have it be on their account. Like I want it to be theirs, right? So
that's what kind of we are enabling.
Okay, it's great that you have that. I didn't know.
Yeah, you have requests.
For me to build that, right?
Yeah,
it would be a lot of work.
That's kind of like why Composio is trying to solve essentially that part. You can use connections, like create and manage connections for your users. So what you need to do is just kind of get an entity. You can pass in like a unique ID for your users. It can be, let's say, kind of just an email ID, for example. That's unique, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And Composio creates an entity on kind of like Composio's backend for the same. And then for each user, you can kind of initiate a connection. Once you initiate the connection, let's say it's an OAuth based app, for example, like Gmail, Google Sheet. But most of the newer applications support OAuth. So you'll get a redirect URL. You'll just need to show that to your customer. Your customer needs to click it.
Yeah.
They'll get redirected to the Gmail OAuth screen that we have all seen, like you're giving permission.
Yeah.
Once they give permission, Composio has the
And
kind
you're
of
storing and managing the refresh token on your side.
Yes, we are doing all that for you. Like
that's
nothing, you don't need to manage the refresh token, refresh it again. We do it for you.
That's a big deal actually right there. Because then I can do, these 250 integrations, I can do 10 of them, not have to like implement that 10 store.
Exactly.
That's really nice. Well, speaking of, like, what are people using it for? Like, what are the cases? I mean, you're sitting there and people are interacting with you and asking questions and on your forums and stuff. Like, what are some of the use cases? What are the most common, like, things that are taking off and like that are clearly big already,
Yeah. So a bunch of people are building like personal assistant.
Oh yeah.
The AI personal assistants using Composio. That's where kind of tools like Gmail, Calendar, Notion, Slack.
Is it like indie hackers building it for their own good, or is it product companies building it as a service, or what?
It's a mix. We have a bunch of startups. Like we have now 300 plus companies building on top of Composio. So a bunch of AI agent companies are using Composio and backend to kind of get access to Gmail and all these kind of tools.
Yeah.
So personal assistant is a big one, obviously.
Yes,
The other one is like AI SDRs. We recently did a AI SDR kit launch where you can build your own AI SDRs. We have connection to Salesforce, HubSpot, a bunch of people enrichment software like Apollo, Zoom Info, People Data Labs.
So kit would mean you've actually implemented a basic app. Some
It's a template.
starting repo. Or
yes,
something like
exactly.
That. Interesting. Do you have people using those to like enter hackathons and try to get ahead?
Yeah, I think there would be some people.
You can imagine how impressive it would be to start with a kit like that and have a full working thing that's doing agentic stuff.
Yes.
But it's also a great way to learn and understand, like, how might I build my own agentic system end to end,
Yeah, I agree.
It's really cool. And then you mentioned different frameworks. Like I saw Letta, they actually debuted at the Tinkers a couple months ago here.
Oh,
that was the first time they showed the framework. I was like, it's only been 2 months. I was surprised to see it already part of your platform. Why did you add Letta there? I was curious.
Yeah, so in the Letta recently launched their agent development environment, ADE.
Yeah.
So kind of we have a first party integration where if you want to use tools like Gmail, Salesforce, etc., you can create Composio like account, use the same API key in Letta's ADE and get access to all these tools.
It seemed to me that their pitch was kind of like, so you've got LangGraph, you've got Vertex AI Agent Builder, you've got like even the small agent stuff from Hugging Face, you've got GPT Index guys, a lot Llama Index has jumped in and others. But Letta's thing was like stateful agents. Like they have like you log in and see them on their website and you can configure them there as part of the low code plus coding framework. And then you get observability kind of baked in, which is anytime you're doing agents, you need observability because otherwise it's so complex. They only launched 2 months ago. So how did you hook up with them? I'm curious.
Oh, they're good friends, Charles and Sarah, working together to kind of enable Composio inside their AD.
Got it.
Essentially, kind of, they're like, they have built something really cool.
Why are you so excited about it? I'm just curious.
I mean, I read the MemGPT paper. It was like one of the kind of really cool papers out there. I think it launched kind of last year sometime.
Yeah.
I was a big fan then. And it's amazing. I think like these kind of agents, some of them definitely need long-term memory. If you're talking to a personal chatbot, you would want them to know what happened 1 year back.
Yeah.
So something of that statefulness is definitely a must in those type of scenarios. And that's where they've done a great job.
I mean, if you're building an agent, I don't want another CRUD interface. As a user, I just want something I can trust.
Yeah.
So I need the state to be really good. Like ultimately, if I ask for a citation or proof, I need to have it. I can't just say, update this action item and mark this thing as done or what is on my priority list. I can't do any of that and have it be 86% of the time successful and just random the other, I can't have that.
Yeah.
So that statefulness is, you think the solve there, is that part of the solve?
Yeah, I think accuracy personally comes from like a bunch of the quality of the tools that I think we are trying to improve and we are somewhat there.
Mm-hmm.
I think what they help definitely is bringing the right context into the picture. So if I say like kind of last week, I was looking at this particular PPT I think that's where the combo helps, where they have the long-term memory of what happened last week and can bring in the right context, and we can have good quality tools so that the agent can do the right thing.
Interesting. Yeah, that history, it seems to be part of the next frontier for these kind of apps of utility that you can provide. I remember there are plenty of meeting summarizers. One of them is read.ai, and they're like in the co-working space where we used to be in Seattle. And rather than only just summarize the meeting you just had with the action items, they're also going to tell you, like, how has the project evolved over the last 6 months? It's doing that kind of deep memory work that allows that. Now, as a developer, that's a lot of work. And so having that kind of baked into like the framework that then your tools have access to, that's really powerful. Then you can start to build very tailored applications for your domain without having to take on that much work, right? What else have you seen you used on your platform? How's it? I mean, when did you get started, for one thing? Like this idea of like building the connector points for agents to use. Is that the idea that you started with? And when did you get started?
We started with a bit different idea. We were essentially building Devin for integrations, and that's back in 2023 when the LLMs were still not there in some sense. What we were saying was a bunch of these players in my past have done integrations where you need to connect with APIs. Some of them can be very complex, time-taking. And what we were saying was, you give us the spec, you give us some of the integration code that you've already written, and we'll generate the rest of it for you, essentially, create a PR.
Got it, yeah.
And we figured like the LLM quality is still not there yet. We were not getting that accuracy. But at the same time, we had to do integrations for LLMs. We had to integrate with GitHub, for example, so that the agent can create a PR. Like we had to integrate with linear so that like it can look at the linear issues. And that's where we figured like sometime down the line when people are building these agents, when like most of the software will be agents, I think integration for agents will become a very big problem that a bunch of these developers will run into.
Sure.
And that's where we started somewhere around like last year, January, around the current version of Composio. And yeah, I mean, that has been the journey and kind of a thesis. We were very early in that sense. Like I think January 2024, nobody was speaking that much about agents. Like before that, even function calling was getting introduced when we were building coding agents at that time.
Yeah.
So things aligned and the agents became big and integration for agents become a very big problem. And like, yeah, I think it has been a good ride.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so now you're powering these companies that are building personal assistant applications and SDR applications.
People are building Devin type use cases using Composio. So like PR review agent, actual coding agents. We have tools like code indexing tools where very similar to IDE. Like as a human, we have access to so much support and IDE where you can click a function and figure out what the function definition is, go to that function, figure out what a class definition is. For these agents to write good quality tools, they also need good quality support, right? So that's what we are providing with like LSP level tooling where agent can query like a function definition and all these things.
What if I wanted to do like, I want to dive into one of them. Like, do you have Google Sheets as a tool?
Yeah.
Okay. So if I wanted to create an app, like I think the Sheet is a great app. And Google's Sheets is a great one. There's multiplayer, all that stuff. So I might want to provision like a little shared resource, a little, schedule or a pro forma estimate of an event I'm planning or anything, right?
Yep.
Where I want to have like, I want to invite some other people into it, but maybe give them less permissions, but I want them visibility. I want to be able to edit, but I also want to write some code to synchronize from like some other data I've got from one of your other tools or my own app. I could do that.
Can you kind of come again on the use case exactly?
So the use case would be like, for example, let's say I'm planning an event or a series of events. So I have a calendar in a Google Sheet and each row is like a proposed date of an event. And the column is like event name, venue, address, and then like status, like is it booked? Is it whatever? It's basically, I want to use a Google Sheet as a shared, like, project management interface. Right. And so now I want to populate that with API calls using agents. So there's something, if I get an email that's like, oh, the venue's booked. And I'm like, sweet.
Oh, God.
Maybe I CC my agent and be like, venue's locked. And then have it automatically go to the sheet, change that one row column.
Yeah, I think that's doable. We support a thing called trigger when it's like notification for an agent.
Let's just pull it up.
So I'll quickly showcase you. We have, let's say I go to Gmail.
And I'm interested not just in the trigger aspect, but like, how do you actually reach into a spreadsheet and update one cell? Like, what is the interface to specify that.
Yeah.
At what level am I interacting?
Yeah. So kind of this is the trigger where you can essentially enable this trigger, like new Gmail received message trigger. So whenever a message is received for the account that the like Composio has access to, we'll notify you. We support webhook. So if you can create a server.
So like I go to your website and I say, I want to create a Gmail trigger. If something's received to this and this and conditions are met, call the webhook. And then that's on my server. I receive a webhook.
Yeah, you can do that, or you can have very simplified, like we support like WebSocket type of things where you can create these simple kind of decorator based callback, and you'll get like, you can filter here as well, and you'll receive the right event, which you can get create a function and do. Yes, exactly.
Neat.
Once you receive an email, you'll directly get this callback, and then you can have an agent look at the email and then update the
let's
sheet.
assume I've got the perfect prompt and it knows when to update the status to book. How would I need to have the agent go like, okay, find the right sheet. Maybe the agent has access to all the sheets that are like in the folder of events.
Right.
Find the right one by name, and then find the right row by vendor name.
Yes.
Find the right column by like status.
Yes. Exactly.
How would what is the interface?
Like I think in the kind of,
and by the way, doing this with Gmail or with Google's actual APIs would be a royal pain.
Yes.
You're going to help me get done by describing it in English.
Yes.
That's what I want. Because if I have to translate that to Google's API codes, it's like it's a day-long effort.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I think essentially you can kind of get a particular sheet. For that, you'll need a Google Drive actually, because Drive has access to all your sheets.
Perfect.
So you have find files where you can get that particular file.
So find files is like a tool you have.
Yes, exactly.
And finding it in that drive based on name or whatever.
Yeah, you can give multiple filters, and like the agent will give the filters. You'll just describe it in a natural language. Then in the sheets, you can kind of, once you have the sheet, you can look up a particular row, batch getter, sheet, etc. And once you do that, like agent has access to kind of how the sheet looks like. It can go to a particular row or particular column and update it directly.
Okay.
It can clear.
Update spreadsheet would inside that one call encapsulate everything I need to find and update a column in a single row.
Exactly. Like a bunch of columns, a bunch of rows, etc. So the agent can update like 3 rows at a time, 1 row at a time, whatever.
When I was using Gmail, the Gmail tool, I used it with English. I was like, give me the emails that sound like this. Is it the same interface here? Or do you also have a lower level, like pass a CSV or something?
You might be using it with something like an OpenAI, etc. So what they get is the schema. OpenAI sees the schema. You can see right here, and that's the function
description. Update a range of cells in Google spreadsheet with provided values.
Exactly.
The values are updated as is. Coke. I'm just kind of reading through and understanding. So as the developer, when I call the bulk update sheet function, what am I passing to customize it?
This is like essentially getting passed to OpenAI. It's all seamless. You don't get to know.
Yeah.
But this is what it is getting passed to OpenAI using function calling.
What am I sending to Composio besides the name of the tool?
Essentially, it will be the name of the tool.
Yeah.
I think this is the one. So you would be doing something like this. Kind of you're passing Composio toolset.get tools.
Yeah.
Like here you're giving Google Sheet.
Yeah.
And then this is the natural language task. Yes.
So I did that with the Gmail extraction. I'm asking specifically, what is the task string to update a sheet where the row matches this and the column is this?
Right. You can specify it in natural language.
I would literally be like, hey, update the sheet on the row for Microsoft. Exactly. Change the status column to done.
Yep. And essentially OpenAI client will look at the function schema.
Got it.
That OpenAI Composio passes and gives the right set of parameters, and you'll be done.
That's great. Begs the question, observability. How do I know it worked?
Yeah. So essentially there are multiple ways to look at it. You'll get a response from OpenAI in natural language, which will have some kind of information around it, but you can also look at it in R logs. So essentially, some of these were kind of successful, some of them were unsuccessful. You can see this is somewhat current form of logs. We are launching a much better version of logs by end of this week, where you'll have much more data.
Could I also write it? I guess I updated the sheet, and then I could be like, could I call another call that's like, hey, give me a snapshot of this whole sheet.
Yeah.
And then just sort of like ask, did it update in the way that I expected it to? Yeah. And then if it failed, could I do like undo?
Yeah.
Because Gmail has that. It's like operating almost like a human would.
Yeah, exactly. So you can do all that with like our Google Sheet tool. It's like fully autonomous. The agent has access to it. So you can converse in the natural language and like see what happened. Like it will get the element, show it to you. If it feels like the job was not done right, you can ask it to edit undo what.
Could you pull that star GitHub repo code up again?
Yeah, you mean this one, right?
Yeah, that one. So I'm writing code. If I'm not using agent framework, I'm writing procedural code like this, essentially, with little bits of English sprinkled in to like abstract away all that stuff that would be day-long projects otherwise.
Yes.
Now I'm starting to wire this together, and I'm like, okay, in my workflow, I want to get an email, reply yes, and then have that trigger, go update the spreadsheet. And I could definitely implement that using everything we're talking about here. And I could implement it in code like this. Is there a higher level abstraction where I could implement even that part just in English? I mean, like if I could model my system at a higher level and say, these are the things at a high level. I know I've got an inbox I monitor with these addresses. I've got a Google Sheet for this and stuff over in that drive, even a spec. I could even spec it like an English and then have it go, you generate that code and run it for me. Is that world coming? Kind of like a Devon for agents.
Right now, if you index your docs in Cursor, I think it does a pretty good job there. That's what I use for my coding right now.
So just do it that way and then still be the programmer.
Yeah, I think, I mean, the future is that, right? Like that will be the like natural language coding thing.
Cause I mean, back to like agent frameworks, if I'm building my agent stuff, first of all, I haven't had much success with autonomous experiments. No one has really yet. It's coming, but, and to build a system like I'm talking about, I need it to work and I'm okay with doing a little bit of work. However, there's a gulf between even that work I just described and having a spec. And today I do just sit in Cursor, but if there was a higher level abstraction, it'd be great. And I don't feel like it's LangGraph or Crew AI, because that's just another world where I have to spec it still. It's still pretty low level, right? Is there anyone working on that kind of like low code spec driven way of creating agents?
Yeah, I mean, I know a bunch of our customers who are early stage are doing something of that sort. They are in beta, so kind of can't take the name.
Are they coming to the Tinkers meetup tonight?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. But there are a bunch of no code like stuff that's happening. So for example, Langflow is one of them. Composio is integrated into Langflow.
Oh, interesting. How does it work?
Yeah, it's essentially a no code builder, kind of like you have like all these kind of components. And one of the components is Composio, where you can get your agent access to all these tools. And the other components are kind of chat OpenAI, where like you connect like very similar to kind of what you do in the code, connect these dots and puzzles and create agents.
Got it. And I'm sure they probably have some stuff modeled that you have modeled as well, like email or whatever. And there's going to be overlap in all these things.
Yeah. I mean, they're kind of like essentially partners. So kind of like Composio is the tool set for them to connect to Gmail, etc.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Interesting. How do people make sense of just all of the tool choices that are out there?
We have tried to be kind of give like essentially categories. So if somebody is interested in developer tools, they can just click developer tools and just get only developer related ones. Somebody wants to look at CRMs, then they can just go to CRMs and get all the CRMs like Pipedrive, HubSpot, Sales. Yeah. All of
so a good starting point for you guys would be to see which integrations you've got worked out to get you an idea of what use cases might be most appropriate here. And then the kits. Are your kits that you described, are those pretty well developed out or?
Yes. Okay. So I think we recently launched like AI SDR kit. That's what I mentioned. Right?
Okay. Yeah.
We are launching a crypto kit.
Oh.
Like Yohei launched Pippin, right?
Oh yeah.
And that became really big success. And kind of that's where we are in, like we have integrated a bunch of crypto frameworks like Coinbase and like a bunch of others essentially. And you can kind of do your own like Web3 trades using Composio via the agent, etc. So that's coming. We did a SweeKit launch where like you can build your own Devon using Composio. We have like a AI customer support kit coming up. So
nice. That'll be good.
A bunch of these things are in the progress. We have a bunch of these tools, but like creating good quality templates so that like they're production ready.
You are you're kind of agnostic to which LLMs you use, right? I assume.
Yeah, we have kind of partnered with all the inference providers. So if you want to use Grok with all the open source LLMs, DeepSeek, etc., Together AI.
Can I use APIs that generate those things in workflows with Composio?
Yes, some of them do exist. So kind of like image generation, kind of passing it like
are you passing like a pointer to URL at that point or binary or how?
It's a mix. In some cases we support, like in the SDK we support taking input from file as well. So if you have a file on your local storage, you want to give access to Composio.
Oh, interesting. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. So if you wanted to build multimedia workflows using Composio, that would be something you do in a first class way.
Yes, we have like actually a bunch of users using Twitter media, like a tool that we have where kind of they can upload like Twitter, like images, etc. as well via Composio. Upload it to Twitter and create posts.
Talk about things like LinkedIn, where the LinkedIn API itself is pretty locked down and there's different levels you apply for.
Yeah.
Do you have support for that?
We have like support for kind of the APIs that we have access to, because otherwise it goes into that kind of shady territory, right?
So if you're often as a LinkedIn user,
Yeah.
first class, you have a create post
Yes.
API.
Yes.
So that's interesting.
Yeah.
What about if you were working with APIs or systems that didn't have APIs or they were locked down, could you fire up a browser process? Which ones do you support and how would you go about that?
So we have local tools, which are kind of in our open source repo. So there we support essentially Anthropic computer use. We have a Docker container where you can give access to the whole browser, etc. Like whole computer essentially via Anthropic computer use tools.
And I'm running that on my own machine and a container on my machine.
Yes.
Then
exactly. Or somewhere else. Like I think we support E2B, Fly.io, a bunch of all these instance frameworks.
Yeah.
And that's on our open source side.
Do you have people using that right now, using computers in production systems?
I don't know in production, but a bunch of people are using that definitely.
To do what?
Essentially, kind of it's like multifold, right? Like as you mentioned, like LinkedIn, like that can't be done without browser right now.
Yeah.
So that like all the social accounts access, some of them don't have great APIs.
Stuff that's more locked down.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's talk a little bit about security again. We touched on it at the very beginning, and I think it's so important.
Yeah.
When you fire up a browser and do stuff, security is a really unsolved thing, right? Or it's a little janky. Like, what am I going to do? Like, store my cookie file on the cloud, and like that's the scary, right? Also, you're using OAuth and wrapping that and managing it for me. That feels like that's familiar territory. That's how APIs were designed to be consumed.
Yep.
Is there anything else that you should say about how your security model works? For me as an app developer, we talked about the multi-tenant stuff, which is really cool. Anything else in the realm of security?
Yeah, I mean, like, kind of, we have a bunch of data flowing through us, right? But all of that is encrypted. So, I mean, only the user who has created the account can see it. We have like a bunch of these kind of multi-project,
When I pulled my emails through Google's API, did that come through you in encrypted form? Like you couldn't even see the
Yes.
email?
Essentially, we have it in a database, but in an encrypted form. So I can't see it.
But when I use your API to actually work with it, that's at the point where you're decrypting it?
Yes, exactly.
So that's pretty cool. So if you had like a server leak or something like that, it wouldn't be leaking even a log file.
Yes, exactly.
It gets decrypted even in that UI.
Yes, exactly.
Minute. Okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think we have multi-user support. So you can give like only view access to some users so that they don't have access to send an email from your account, etc. So that all control you can do. It's proper RBAC that we have built.
Do you have any kits for personal assistance and email related stuff?
Yeah, we have a bunch of
show us something.
starters. Like we have, for example, AI productivity. I might have forgotten what it exactly is, but like it kind of, this one essentially, we have a image analyzer tool. So it will kind of look at your kind of what's going on in your laptop. And if it sees that you're getting stuck or somewhere, it essentially will notify you that you can do this to kind of unblock yourself.
Stuck in what way?
Like I'm kind of, anything. Like it just kind of uses like GPT-4V vision to keep on sending the images. And if it feels like you're stuck at some point over like 3-4 images, it will just notify you. You can do this to unblock yourself.
Oh, interesting. So it's an ambient agent example.
Yes, it's an ambient agent.
That's really cool. And it's how many lines of code is that?
This is essentially less than 100 lines of code.
So it's just a thing that you're going to run as a daemon on your local laptop or whatever. And
exactly.
It's going to be there. And how does it notify?
We use system tools. So kind of like it's a local tool where kind of we use like pop-up tools.
Okay, that's very cool.
Yeah, we have like a calendar agent that I just showed. We have a scheduling agent, I remember. We have a presentation agent where you can create, given a data like spreadsheet, you can create a cool presentation around it.
Oh yeah.
This is also like less than 70 lines of code essentially.
It's really cool. I mean, thinking about like the local tools, what are some of the other local tools you have? File system.
Yeah.
You obviously have access to screen. It sounds like what else?
We have like, I think system tools like notifying you, kind of getting access to some of the notifications that pop in.
Yeah. Local notification on my OS.
Yes.
What about networking tools? Figure out where my printer is, what printers I have installed, things like that.
That's a good idea. I think we should have it. It's not there.
Can people contribute? Is there any aspect that's open source?
Yeah, it's open source. All the local tools are kind of open source.
Got it.
It's just going there and kind of.
Okay, cool.
I think we have a bunch of requests of such sorts. It's just, I think, kind of like
home,
a small
home automation stuff.
Yeah, I think that's also another super cool idea. I think we should do that.
It's very cool. I mean, none of us would have said this 3 months ago, but you can create HAL 2000 at home, air gapped, like with vision, with reasoning now.
Yes,
running on your
local
computer.
Machine. Yeah,
and it doesn't have to be fast if it's running in an ambient agent kind of like manner.
I agree.
It doesn't have to be
super fast.
1, 2, 3, 10 seconds, tokens a second. Fine.
Yep.
If it's there, kind of in the background and waking up to do useful work for you.
Yeah, I think you can have like some IoT level signals to kind of figure out, there's some fire around you, or kind of like I don't know, like a lot of cool stuff.
Well, just like monitor energy use or air quality. There's so many devices that you can get now for nothing.
Yep.
And if they're on your network, you can then figure out a way to get the data and have AI figure out the best way to use that. So, hey, open a window.
Yeah.
And the reasoning means that you as a programmer don't even have to think about the use case. Literally, I could be like, here's a bunch of data from different devices. I'm a human, make my life better. Yeah. And it will probably go, CO2 is high, open the window.
Exactly.
And then also figure out like, should I use the Sonos speakers to make that a loud alert and really interrupt you because this is important? Or should I send you an email?
Yep.
And you can do all of that with Composio.
I think that's the future that we want to enable. I think that's the future that I see, and that's what we are trying to.
That's why I think like, this is why I go back to like, I want to specify what I just specified as a single Google Doc, one sheet.
Yep.
And then I just want to go like.
That's also somewhat our users are creating essentially code-based agents. So there are different paradigms of agents, like in paradigms of function calling. One of them is function calling directly, like using OpenAI function calling, like LangChain and other frameworks. Some of them use they don't use function calling directly. They put it in the system prompt and ask the LLM to output a YAML of sorts or structured JSON. That's another way. Then there's another third paradigm where like agents are like essentially LLMs are given functions that they can call in the system prompt, and they write code using those functions. Like functions are part of that code. For example, instead of like the way that we saw, the agent is writing code, and in between one of the lines is send underscore email in the bracket, like the right parameters. That's another way of doing function calling.
Yeah.
And like, I think coding is improving at a massive kind of rate. So maybe that's the future. Maybe function calling is the right way.
Sure.
So I think we'll get to know. But I think what you just said, I think like in 6 months down the line, even bigger specs will be just one agent. Like you don't need to kind of write code to do it.
Yeah. Very cool. A neat future to think about. Fun to play with. What are some of the cool things that you see? You're here in the Bay Area now. How long have you been here?
So I'm properly moving now.
Okay. So you guys have been on that kind of by two cities approach for a while. A lot of people here are, which is great. And now you've got your O1 and you're moving here. It's wonderful. You're off to the races, a lot of traction. What are some of the cool things you've seen in the community here that have really impressed you or opened up your mind?
I mean, I think a bunch, right? It's very difficult to kind of say one, but I think a friend of mine is making video-based agents. So kind of using agentic approach, you can edit videos and like create videos on the fly. Like, that's pretty cool according to me. Yohi did Pippin, which is an AI influencer. So cool. That's pretty cool as well.
Yeah.
Coding-based agents, for example, Lutra, I really like the product.
Yeah.
Jishan, I think is really cool. Yeah, I think the whole computer use stuff, still think it's like early days.
Yeah.
But a bunch of cool things coming up, a bunch of cool people working on that front. I think it's insanely good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What are you tinkering on? Any side projects? Anything that you're in your spare time? You have pulled out something that dropped and play with it. Anything like that?
I think mostly with like Composio, like kind of like just, I think it's so much fun right now. The agentic stuff. My side projects are also kind of like one of the AI productivity one.
Yeah.
I was just tinkering around like last week. Last week has been a bit hectic, but kind of just because I thought that is a problem where kind of like I'm wasting some of my time and like LLMs should be good enough to kind of notify me I'm wasting my time. You should just do this and kind of move ahead.
Yeah, it's cool.
So that's something that I built.
Ambient AI agent.
Yeah, Ambient agent is really cool, right? I think even Harrison did some example around email. Yeah, I think some really
Very
cool
cool.
stuff on that front.
Very cool. How did you first hear about AI Tinkerers? What was your first introduction to the community?
Yeah, I think it was our good friends at Copilot Kit. I think Yuli messaged me around that, and
cool.
I saw and was really impressed.
Nice.
In there, both in SF and in Bangalore.
Yeah, it
So
was awesome.
the best part is you're global. So that definitely helps connection between both the places.
Bangalore was actually started by a person who was between two cities, in this case, Seattle. But he was going to be in Bengaluru for his parents or something for a few months. Why don't they start the chapter? It's an incredible chapter. They have over 100 people show up every time. There's a wait list. Great people involved in the community there. I was really grateful to see you pop up as a presenter. It was awesome. So thank you for that.
Yep.
Well, hopefully this will be a big year for you in 2025, and I hope to work together and do interesting things.
Yep. Looking forward to that.
Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks.
Where can people learn more about Composio?
Composio.dev. We have a Twitter account, Composio_HQ, Composio HQ, and I think LinkedIn also. Just search Composio.
All right. Thank you. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Thanks, Ranjit.